It certainly hasn't been a very good start for Zoran the Not-So-Magnificent. New Yorkers are pissed, big time, as they ought to be. A mere 8 days in office. That's all it took for the very same voters who complained about affordability to realize that they just elected the guy whose policies will make everything more expensive. And it just got a whole lot worse. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you make sense of the madness with breaking news and analysis you're not going to hear anywhere else. So make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. The not-so-amazing Zoran Mamdani is facing the wrath of New York City voters today. Just 1 week in office, and his constituents already feel completely betrayed. On January 4th, just 3 days after Mamdani was sworn in as New York City's 112th mayor, promising all of this free stuff, New York Transit had a very different opinion. Subway and bus fares throughout the city officially increased. They got more expensive. Fares were raised to $3. So the socialists who promised free this and free that get sworn in, and in literally days, transportation costs go up. One New Yorker took to social media and complained, quote, "Mamdani promised us a free ride, but all we got is a higher fare." Another wrote, "The mayor promised us free rides and we were deceived." Now, to be fair to Mamdani, he did not actually cause this fare increase. The MTA board, a state-run authority controlled by Governor Kathy Hochul, approved the hike back in September 2025, months before Mamdani took office. In fact, as it turns out, we're now learning the mayor doesn't even control transit fees. How do you like that? But that didn't stop Mamdani from promising this.
But the question is how you'll make them free.
We will fund the revenue that would have otherwise been brought in from fares. And that's something that we would do in partnership with Albany. And I've put forward two proposals. The first is to raise taxes on the top 1% of New Yorkers by 2%. That would raise $4 billion. The second is to raise the state's top corporate tax rate to match that of New Jersey, which would raise $5 billion.
Now, if you don't know, his numbers there are actually blatantly wrong. The guy, as it turns out, is actually a tax and math illiterate. And, of course, New York's press corps is too ideologically infested to notice. Mamdani fundamentally does not understand, or at least at that time did not understand, how marginal tax brackets work. So, as you just heard there, Mamdani promised a 2% income tax on millionaires, which he said would raise $4 billion. There's just one catastrophic problem with that. New York City uses a marginal tax bracket system for its income taxes with 4 current brackets. So your income is divided into segments, right? With each segment getting taxed at progressively higher rates. It starts with a 3% tax, that goes to a 3.7%, 3.8%, and finally 3.9% on every dollar above those earning $50,000. Mamdani's plan would add a 5th bracket at 6% on every dollar earned above $1 million. Here's the brutal reality. His calculations, which you just heard there, where he gets the $4 billion figure from, assumes that the entire $1 million is taxed. The entire $1 million is taxed. He doesn't realize that someone making exactly $1,001,001 would only end up paying an extra 6 cents, because that's how marginal tax rates work. You pay a tax on the income you make when you pass the specific dollar threshold. It's not a tax on the entire $1 million. I mean, the guy was voted into office literally on a scam, or in his case, just tax and mathematic illiteracy. And New Yorkers are finding out the hard way that the mathematics of money always ends up winning. Reality always wins in the end. And here's why that matters. Mamdani's entire campaign centered on one massive promise: making every bus in New York City completely free. You heard him yourself. In fact, Mamdani responded to the rate hike went into effect just a couple of days after it was inaugurated, by hopping on the Q70 bus, New York's only free bus route to LaGuardia Airport. And he posted photos to social media, writing, quote, "Imagine if every bus felt like this." Yeah, great question, Zoran. Well, let's imagine that, especially given the fact that it turns out that you as mayor have nothing to do with that. In fact, the numbers tell a very different story than your campaign rhetoric. As it turns out, making New York City buses, quote, free, whatever that means, I just consider that an F word, would require full state funding, right, from Albany. It would require full state funding, and it would require MTA approval. Governor Hochul has already said there is simply no budget allocation for it imaginable. None. Zippo. The MTA is currently fighting a massive fare evasion crisis and expects to lose $1 billion, that's billion with a B, by 2028 if they don't get it under control. The agency just raised fares specifically to generate an additional $350 million in annual revenue. They're not about to eliminate bus fares and lose billions more. It's just not going to happen, especially when your proposal is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how marginal tax rates work. And here's the kicker. 1 in 5 New Yorkers already can't afford public transportation at current prices. The city has a fares, F-A-I-R-F-A-R-E-S, fares program for low-income residents, but the application process is just so burdensome and the income threshold so strict that a family of 4 has to earn less than $48,000 a year to qualify, far below the city's median household income. So Mamdani's solution to unaffordable transit isn't to make it more efficient or expand discount programs or whatever, or even further privatize it. No, it's to make it, quote, free. There's that socialist F word, which means taxpayers foot the bill while service quality continues to decline. Classic socialist math. But if you thought that was bad, wait until you see the disaster, the utter disaster waiting in the wings. This is going to absolutely blow your mind. So let me ask you a very serious question. If you could earn consistent double-digit returns that are actually guaranteed by the government, why on earth would you continue to gamble on Wall Street? Because while Iranians are watching their currency lose 60% of its value in 6 months, most Americans don't realize that their own investments come with some serious risk as well. Now, I just learned about a method that's completely different from a good friend of mine, Jay. It's backed by government authority. The returns are set by law, and you can actually test the waters with as little as $50. No market timing, no complicated strategies, no dealing with tenants, just a couple spare hours a week. That's it, with minimal cash, but maximum returns. This is the kind of predictable, law-based yield strategy that institutions and hedge funds have quietly relied on for years, but most Americans don't even know about it. That is, until now. I asked Jay how long it would take to teach me. He said, less than an hour. Not only explain the strategy, but actually implement it right in front of me. He shows me how to do it. So I asked him if he could do the same thing for a few hundred of my friends. And Jay said, of course he could. So he's going to host a free live masterclass this Tuesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern. It's all online, absolutely free. And he's going to show you exactly how the system works, why the government guarantees the returns, and how everyday Americans can get started with very little time and very little money. But it's live only, no replays. So go to turleyclass.com to register. That's turleyclass.com, or just text Turley to 72,000. That's Turley to 72000. Again, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. If you want predictable returns without the risk and volatility that we're seeing destroy economies around the world, register now at turleyclass.com or text Turley to 72,000. Meet Sia Weaver. She is Mamdani's director of the mayor's office to protect tenants. Weaver is a longtime Democratic Socialists of America member and tenant organizer who previously led Housing Justice for All, a nonprofit, of course funded by George Soros. Within just 48 hours of her appointment, some of her old social media posts started resurfacing. Now, we're not talking about edgy tweets from high school. We're talking about explicit calls for communist property seizure. In 2018, she posted, "Seize private property." In another tweet a year later, she called private property, including especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy. And in December 2017, she posted, "Elect more communists." Now, those comments turned out to be rather embarrassingly hypocritical after the New York Post exposed the fact that her own mother, a white woman, owns a home in Tennessee worth over $1.6 million. Oh, and by the way, that jacket she's wearing in the picture, yeah, $229. I love the internet. Rules for thee, not for me. But if you can believe it, it actually gets worse. A 2021 video has just resurfaced where she said this.
I think the reality is that for centuries we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good, and we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently, and it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
So there you have it. First, Mamdani promises to tax what he called, quote, whiter neighborhoods. And now his own administrative officials been caught saying that particularly white families are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that they currently have. Now, the good news that is in D.C., Harmeet Dillon, Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights in the Trump administration, she's issued a very public warning to Mamdani and his administration.
Just because you're white doesn't mean you have fewer rights in this country. We all have equal rights in our country, and we will not stand for New York City violating any federal law whatsoever. They should be on notice. They are on high scrutiny, and we will swoop right in and do what's necessary to protect all citizens and taxpayers and residents of New York where they're legally.
Now, the irony in all of this is that New York's housing crisis isn't the result of too little regulation. It's the result of too much. Between 2015 and 2024, New York City enacted at least 6 major housing interventions. Rent freezes in 2015, 2016, 2020. Universal right to counsel for tenants in eviction cases. The Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act of 2019. A COVID eviction moratorium. And good cause eviction laws. Each was sold as protecting tenants and restraining rent growth. The result? Rent prices exploded. Median rents in Manhattan have gone up 25% since 2015. As many as 60,000 rent-stabilized apartments, 5% of the city's stabilized stock, are now warehoused and sitting empty because landlords can't afford code-compliant renovations under rent control restrictions. The vacancy rate citywide, 1.4%. Only 1 in 100 apartments is available for rent. And 154,000 New York City public school children, you heard that right, 154,000 are classified as homeless. Progressive housing policy did not solve the crisis. It made it exponentially worse, as it always does. And Mamdani's answer is more of the same. Rent freezes, public seizure of buildings, and attacking property owners, especially white ones. The good news is more New Yorkers than ever have had it. They're either fleeing The refugee crisis has started with the leftugee crisis, as we like to call it, has already gotten started. Or they're staying and they're fighting back. Either way, Mamdani's pipe dreams are being revealed as just that each and every day. And until then, New York City is indeed following a socialist blueprint, and let's just hope the rest of America is paying very close attention.